The next presenter is Willie Kotze. Willie started his career in horticultural science as an applied researcher, and in 2014 started with the Dutoit Group. And he finds himself in a very interesting position, both on the pre- and post-harvest side of the business. And I think it's a very important place to be. The topic of his presentation is taking apple production from rags to riches, avoid leaving money on the table, and reducing a dime a dozen. Willie, up to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction by the previous two speakers. So obviously at this stage there's some repetition of what's been mentioned before, so I'll try and skip over that, and maybe we can have an extra coffee or two without repeating what's been said up to now. But I've got a slight change on the angle that I'm approaching this, and a lot's been focused so far until what some of the final results and how we evaluate ourselves, and maybe I can add another perception to this in looking at things a little bit more from the backhouse side, and one of the things that I've picked up in the last two seasons. So hopefully I can shed some light on the topic from another angle, but I think the message remains mostly the same. So you won't be able to read it, but that's not the idea. What you actually see in front of you is a normal apple harvesting window. So you start somewhere at one end and you end up somewhere at a different end later this season. And what I'm trying to point out there is that once we begin harvesting apples, there's really no room for escaping. So it's quite, I can show you the pics of the number of bins that needs to be harvested, but I know it's more or less obvious from this is that once you begin, it's a system that sets off and it's going to roll the whole time. So my message here is when you look at this is I'm saying once you get behind, you fall behind, and there's actually no way of catching up. So my first plan of this is going into, we are focusing on quality and class 1, export and pack outs. But we've got a game plan, and the game plan is actually not changing much each season. We go out to the orchards and we prepare the harvest and the crop for the next year. But if we don't, sorry, there's a percentage error at the bottom as well. I changed this a couple of times, but never matter. So whatever you do in your planning, and you approach your harvest time and you know you don't have capacity to execute this, you're going to run into some problems. And our main drivers being production of quality and reducing defects. This forms the base of your platform. And the biggest risk for me is on falling behind is the obvious thing in reacting in most of your growers is what's the first thing you do? And I'm glad Nigel actually mentioned it, but you increase the picking rate. You need to pick up the rate at which we harvest the apples, because it's the obvious thing we do. But with that comes the increased picker defects, bruising, fruit drop, shoulder injuries, and a lot of stem pulls. And the last couple of seasons, we've had a look at some of the trials we've done to increase the on-tree packouts. And wherever the fruit comes back through the packouts, we look at what we produce in the orchard and on the tree. And you get this sense of accomplishment. Yes, this is great apples. I mean, we've done it. And then the results come back, and you look at the evaluation on paper, and it's just difficult to see where you went it so wrong. How could you miss it by that much? I mean, there's just no reflection of what you saw in the orchard and what's on paper. I mean, there's a gap in reality. So you've done a lot of things correct, but the end result is that then not the same. And as we go along into the season, after we've seen we are falling behind. You also lose out on some of the other stuff that we mentioned that's important, and that's the the picking of the more mature fruit because you need to catch up, but then also losing out on some of the next varieties as they follow. So you are already behind. So, and that's just the wheel that keeps on turning and turning, and you never, it's very difficult to get out of that situation in the middle of the season. So, yeah, my message here, I think, is quite clear, and it says, yeah, when you get your game plan, it's good if you have an orchard where you harvest 180 tons opposed to 120 tons. But it's even better if you planned for that and you've got a plan in place to execute that. Because I'll show some results now of how it can go wrong. This is data that was analyzed of some golden orchards that we've had, and on the left-hand side we've got the tons per hectare, and at the bottom side we've got the income. So just to show that there is some correlation between increasing the yield and increasing the profitability. There's about a 60% correlation of that. But what I want to point out here is in a lot of times, a lot of situations you end up with, I can't really see the pointer on the thing. Wow. Okay, so what you need to look at is the top red arrow. And that stretches over a few orchards that's producing somewhere between 120 to 140 tons per hectare. But you can see on the left, like you said, on the left-hand side, but at the bottom side, the profitability of those orchards differs significantly. There's the one that Graham mentioned that will probably be with us within the next 6 to 8 years. But there's also some of his friends that won't be with us. But he produced the same tonnage per hectare. And a lot of that comes from quality issues, or not a lot of that, 90% of that comes from quality issues that you experience. So you've done nothing wrong. You just didn't end up with putting the final spanner in the box. What you can also see is that if we speak about capacity, orchard, if you look at the red arrow going up and down now, you can see someone that produced 60 tons per hectare and managed to get almost all of that into an export carton, made exactly the same money as the guy who worked triple as hard, and put all his bins and capacity and everything that goes with it behind the wrong fruit. So that's, I think the picture from that is quite clear. And we'll speak about some technologies going forward, and I want you to remember this slide because it's not always what we do in the orchard. If we don't manage to get it all the way right to the bin, we skew the results dramatically. This is also a slide I stole from Linda. I just adopted it a little bit. What Linda did here actually is he divided the apple production of the toys for some division. He divided into 4 categories, starting with the blue on the left. What we've done is divided all the orchards into the different categories. And to the left-hand side, you've got the blue colors, which Linda likes to name it blue because it's, in this case, it will be your blue chip orchards. If you look right at the bottom of the blue column, you can see it's divided into the percentage of profit that category actually makes for the division. So if you look at the third last value, it says 60%. So meaning that 60% of the hectares contributed to 70% of the tons. So it was actually productive in terms of that. Hello. I hope you guys can follow me, but I'm just going to stand a little bit closer. So I'm just explaining the way it goes. So you've got the percentage of hectares, percentage of tons, and the percentage of the profit, which is the important part on this side. I've described the production cost at the bottom in terms of 100% production cost. Some of it's got the fixed and some of it's described to the variable. But I just want to lift out something that as you move from the left to the green, it says, well, these orchards are making money. It's actually making all of the money. It's covering all of its production costs plus a little bit of profit. And then the green category, it's 14%. It's only making 4% of the profit. Then you fall further down the ranks where you start only covering some parts of your production cost. And eventually you get the red guys, which is, in this case, I hide some of the data, but I'll open this just for this discussion of this topic a little bit further. But you can see it's not really making money in terms of covering its own cost, and it's actually losing some of your profit. There's some stoute okies over here as well, but we can discuss this a little bit further. So I've got the one category where I say fast forward, which is mainly the blue and the green ones. And then I've got the yellow and orange ones, where I've got the guy with the magnification glass, where I said, let's investigate to see what we can do. And then to the right, I've got the excavator. So that's more or less how it goes. I hope you guys were able to follow on that side. But yeah, excavator, red, pull out, 14 hectares, left ones, 60% of the hectares making, cropping 70% of the tons and making 111% of the profit. And then, yeah, as you move right, some guys lose, some guys wins, but more or less they cancel it out almost. So yeah, I think the other guys have elaborated quite a lot of what you need to do in the fast forward situations. And in some of these situations, it's quite clear of what we can do. So if you've got a massive culling factor, which I think it's normally quite easy to find, it's either sunburn, what it is, it's quite easy to rectify, or sometimes it's poor color. And in most of these situations, we've got a good solution to rectify a large portion of the problem in quite fast. So just to give you an idea of this one, yeah, the orchard on the left, obviously it has no netting on it, and you can see a very open tree structure, and if that's planted under certain circumstances, you can imagine what it will look like if you get 2 or 3 hard days. But you can see you've got a nice managed orchard. You've got flowering from the bottom to the top all the way. So you've managed that, and you've managed from the inside of the branch to the outside of the branch. So you start off with good quality early in the season. So you've done a few things on the horticultural side correct. And if that plays out, it will be good. And if it needs be, you can put in some extra to help you. On the other side of it, you've got a tree that looks completely different. This picture was taken last week. And in a situation like this, there's some other stuff that you need to do before you can put on some easies, like I would use to, or like to call them. Because some of the basics we need to correct there before we can apply something like a reflective mulch or a drape net. And if we talk in terms of volume and capacity, I think you've got some different challenges in this situation compared to some of the other orchards. And this makes it a little bit more difficult when you run into capacity issues. So everybody's going into winter now. So if you didn't have any juice bins, it's easy to see where you need to start jumping in with the saws and where you can start removing branches. In 90% of the orchards where we still see the fruit hanging, I always wonder why we didn't take out the branches last year. How did we miss them? So having the fruit on the trees this time around it makes it a little bit easier to find the problems. So if we look at something like reflective mulching, we have to ask the question always, is it measurable? Can what we do? And in this case, we just applied the mulch in 2 orchards. The first use was an acanthie, and then we moved it over to a rosy glow orchard. And the income increased with about 70,000 rand per hectare for the acanthie orchard, and about 47,000 rand in the rosy glow orchard. So in one season, you accumulated added value of about 120,000 rand with the use of reflective mulch, moving it from one orchard to another orchard. Okay, so it's expensive to buy this stuff, but you can see it's also got a fast turnaround time. In this slide, I've also got an example of, say for instance, I had the 14 hectares that was, I'm just going to go back to this part over here. You can see the hectares where the excavator is 14 hectares that I've opened now. Instead of giving the money, like Graham called it, to flock the dead horse, I can take that 14 hectares. I've worked on a production cost of 220,000 rand. Seems like we're a bit more expensive in Ceres, but nevertheless. So if I, instead of keeping the production cost on that, I used that money. I said I could have bought about 15 hectares of drape netting and 15 hectares of reflective mulch, and then I would have overspent $10. If I used that drape netting in another orchard, like the ones I call my fast forwarding orchards, if I would have used that money, so I just need to point to this. So if I applied to this 15 hectares, my net and my mulch, and this comes from practical trials which we've done, I would have improved my class 1 pack out from 35 to 50%, reduced the class 2 and class 3. The net effect was about 5,300 rand per ton. And if you look at this over this hectare where I had the per hectare, it's about 80,000 rand a hectare, and it's close to 1.2 million rands on this 15 hectares project that I would have combined the reflective mulch and the netting. Obviously, the net in this case was a one-time use, but I was able to use the mulch in 2 previous orchards as well. So I just doubled the hectares here with some of our results we got from packouts as well. So from the 14 hectares that I would have spent 3 million rand for the next few years, as long as I would have kept them farming, I would have lost 3 million rands each year. If I just use this to improve some of my existing good orchards, I would have come up with 2.4 million rand in one season, just from the quick ads that I could have bought. So on paper, it sometimes worked nice. Then I'm back to that previous orchard I showed with a nice uniform flowering. And then in harvest time, it looks like this. On the picture, it's not quite clear, but it actually has a drape net on it. It's got reflective mulch, and you can see it. It started off nice and everything. And this is just to show what some of the other scenarios look like with Crips Red in the same region that we harvested. So here we've applied some practices, which is kind of obvious. Defoliation on an orchard like this, where you don't have any protection, obviously not a good idea. If we take that's actually the exact same block, just with some rectifications where we've applied some netting and some reflective material. The results kind of differ, and I think it's obvious to see where we've made some of the changes. If we look at maturity, a lot of times when we've got the right trees that we apply the stuff to, we are able to condense harvesting to 1 or 2 picks. And yeah, it's not done the wrong way, it's done the right way. There's 2 ways of doing that. The one is you wait until you think it's the right time to harvest, and the other one is to go to harvest when it's the right time to harvest, and you take off the fruit that's ready for that harvest. So a lot of times we see when we open the canopies, we work with the smaller trees, we get good light within. You started off with uniform flowering, like in this stage. And you've got uniform light distribution on the inside of the canopy. That's normally what you can expect. So in terms of the number of times you need to go through that orchard and pick, and the number of times you get fruit drop, it's significantly reduced. Another trial that we've done is also to look at some of the quick fixes. We had reflective mulch in this orchard, and you can see the outcome was quite clear in terms of pack out of class 1, but you can also see the amount of fruit that was harvested on the right-hand side, your left-hand side. Your left hand on the right-hand side, that one. So you can see without any reflective mulch, we added a late color development, and with the reflective mulch, we harvest a lot more fruit closer to maturity. I want to skip back to 3 pictures over here and just say sometimes if you put the wrong stuff on the wrong place, it's also obviously you find the wrong answers. There's no use in putting a reflective mulch into an orchard like this. You obviously have to kill the sunburn first before you get any results. The last part of it was, said enough about mixed maturity. Another thing that we often find is why the packouts differ significantly is on the other stuff we do get great color, but then a lot of the defects that we develop over time happens in the cold room, and which not what that wasn't so apparent on the day it was harvested. This one is also an example of that. The bottom graph, the one that's a snapshot, and you can see you've got the starch rating at the bottom of the graph, and you've literally got everything in there, ranging from 10 to 100%. So I'd rather work with the right left-hand one, and that contributes massively to your quality afterwards if you look at it throughout the whole season. In a lot of these instances, you end up with more physiological defects, and I don't want to dwell into that. But my biggest problem was a lot of cases when we look at the data. Okay, 2 more slides. You'll see that we lose a lot of the fruit that we actually produced in the orchard. So we managed to get the color, and then we screw it up all over again in the last part of handling. So literally on the last day we handle it in the orchard, we screw it up. And you can see to the right-hand side is all the class 3 apples, and those apples had nothing wrong with them except for being bruised. It's mainly stem punctures and bruising that kept them out. So we got it right, and then we lost it all again. And then you end up with the figures that we normally see on the board in a boardroom of 30% and 40% exports. But in reality, we had a lot better run. But if we don't take care of the last slide of it, we end up with more issues. So in the last few seasons, we've looked a lot at some stem clipping, and it's just a way of managing the fruit in the last process of handling. So we get the stems a little bit longer, and then we also clip them, and it's just a way for us, a practical way to have more control over the harvesting situation. Because the last thing you want in a bin like that, if someone gives you that, gives you a pack out figure of 40 to 50%. Yeah, so some more on that. The same went for a lot of golden work we did, which is easy because there's no color. But again, we stripped the trees in the orchard, and you come back to the figures afterward, and you have 10% less of what you did, and that all came down to handling. Yeah, I can skip that one. 2 seconds. If you plant some new orchards, I've done the cost over time of this, but if you look at the initiation cost or the initial cost of what it cost to establish a new orchard, Is ek heel uit? Okay, 2 minutes. Thanks. If you look at establishing some new orchards today, the green is just what it normally costs for a normal 4.5 meter planting. And then the red one is all the way down close to 1 million. And if I updated the figures, it will go a little bit over 1 million rand to establish a new orchard. So it's more than double up in the last few years to establish a new orchard. But what's interesting what you will find is if you look at the net cash flow each year, once your canopy is filled, and you can measure it time over time, it's only the only thing that will change the profit of that orchard is if something major changes in the packouts. If you have 80 tons last year with the same quality as this year, you will probably have a 3% inflation in the market. What will change is if the tongue from grain comes and it kills you. But even with the high cost of the red line, which is where you've planted a high density orchard and you've taken good care to ensure that you get good packouts, you can see over time on this axis over here, you can see you'll end up with about 5 million rands cumulative in a 20-year period in that orchard compared to the conventional. On the other side is, if you look at the light blue line, is where you plant high density on a very expensive system, and you don't get a good return because of packouts. And if you don't look at what your biggest culling factor is, you might be worse off than the green line, which was an easier and a cheaper system to manage, and it was cheaper to plant, and it would have been more profitable over time compared to a lower density system.